Good morning. It is now 10:01 and I will begin this morning's committee. I would like to begin by welcoming everyone to this meeting of the Assets and Procurement Committee here at New Shire Hall and everyone watching via YouTube. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit and assemble in the car park. The closest fire escape is through the middle doors on my left. Would the Democratic Services Officer report any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies received from Councillor Count, with Councillor Simon King due to substitute, but not present at the moment. Councillor Dupre and Councillor Maria King substituting. Councillor Goff with Councillor Sebastian Kindersley substituting, and apologies from Councillor Beckett.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Councillor Kindersley.
Possibly. There is an item where there is discussion in relation to the planning permission required for 2 properties, which would come to the county's planning committee, of which I'm a member.
Thank you.
Yes, I would also like to do that. I'm a member of the planning committee, and if that is the case, I will do the same. Thanks.
Councillor Golsack.
I am not a member of the planning committee. I am the ward member for Soham North, and obviously I'm very familiar with Soham South, where both these properties reside. But as I don't know exactly what the properties are or where they are, I may have to declare an interest as the proceedings open up, because I don't know at the moment.
Thank you. Right. Item number 2, minutes and action log. We are being asked to approve the minutes of the committee meeting held on 17 July 2024 as an accurate record. If any committee member wants to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes only. I see no objections, so we will take that as carried unanimously. Oh, sorry. On that basis, are committee members happy to approve the minutes as written, subject? Sorry. Are people happy with the minutes? I think is where I'm going with this. Lovely. Thank you. Attached to the minutes is an action log. Could officers have any updates?
I do have an update to provide to the action log. Minute 50B, the corporate performance report, there was a discussion on whether farm buildings were included as part of the rental costs, and officers agreed to provide further detail and investigate if there was a more useful target. Farm buildings are included in rental valuations, and a more detailed report on how rents are agreed together with suggestions on benchmarking can be discussed at the next County Farms member working group.
Thank you. We have received no petitions or public questions. We are therefore asked to note the action log. Do members have any questions? Okay, we will take it as noted. Item number 3, petitions and public questions. We have received no petitions or public questions. Item number 4, children in care residential service property usage. Can I ask Lucy Munt, Head of Service for Adults and Health Commissioning, and John McMillan, Service Director for Legal and Governance, to present this report, which is on page 17 of your agenda pack?
Lucy's just popped out. Oh, she's back. So I'm John McMillan, Head of Assets, and Lucy works on the Children in Care as Head of Commissioning. This is a proposal to use 2 houses on the council's rural estate at Soham for the Children in Care residential service. The County Council continues to incur large costs to provide accommodation for children in care, and there are budget overspends. Using rented properties is unsustainable financially, and often because there's short-term impacts the well-being of children. Children and Young People's Committee considered a report about the CIC residential strategy in June 24. They approved the business case to procure an external service provider to deliver a CIC residential service, and subject to Assets and Procurement Committee approval, to use 2 rural estate houses to provide accommodation for children and their carers. Both houses are vacant and, following amalgamation, are not required for the farm. The isolated rural locations are preferred for children with high support needs. The costs of looking after children in care are high. Using an external service provider will generate cost avoidance upwards of £638,000, and use of existing council properties rather than purchasing or renting in the market. Refurbishment costs are estimated to be up to 1 million, and the work will be procured in full compliance with the County Council's procurement regulations. The costs are high, but this is to provide a safe and secure environment for the children who have high support needs. So that is safety glass, underfloor heating, securing the outside environment, and upgrading energy performance. The 24-25 business plan makes provision for this spend. The business case has been further revised down and was approved by Capital Board in March, but this hasn't yet been updated in the Council's capital programme. Both properties require a planning change of use, and one will require a change to the agricultural occupancy restriction that's on it. A freeze is proposed. The houses will be let to a service provider on a commercial full repairing and insurance tenancy for up to 10 years, with a rent paid equivalent to the farmhouse rent. Subject to planning and committee consents, we would hope to have the works ready for a service provider in spring 25. Any questions?
Councillor Bowden.
May I just raise, which may be a point of order, or it may just be a question. I'm quite astonished about this particular item, although I fully understand the business case, and I'm not going to quibble about the numbers on the business case. I like the numbers. But what astonishes me is that we are an assets committee, and we're not told what these assets are. What are the addresses? Which particular assets are we talking about? And it can be relevant for various issues. Some of my colleagues may bring up a bit later. But could we be told which the properties are that we're meant to be discussing, please?
John.
Yeah. So the 2 properties at Soham, one is known as Engine Farm Soham, and the other one is known as Middlemere Farm Soham. So the 2 properties are quite close together, which is part of the attractiveness of this package.
I'm very grateful for that. May I request, Chair, that in future, when there is a proposal to do something with one of our or 2 of our properties, that we're told in the paper what the properties are, please.
Yep. Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Thanks for the report, and thanks for the clarification for where these properties are. I don't know them. It's not my area. I'm not aware of it, but I have recently had a bit of experience in dealing with residential children's homes, and I just want to touch before. In principle, I agree with the recommendations. I think it's very sensible, but I just want to sort of fire a warning shot over the bow of the ship, so to speak, really. And this is in relation to, you know, all residential children's homes should be locations where children are able to thrive. It's a regulatory compliance issue. According to the children's homes regulations, a location assessment must be conducted for establishing a residential children's home. This assessment should address several key issues, and I'm going to list them. Okay, safeguarding concerns. Okay, proximity. You say it's on an old farm, so you know. I remember the old government warnings about working and playing on a farm. So, you know, are there any safeguarding concerns at this location? Accessibility to local services. I don't know. You know, where are they, and can young people thrive having access to local services? Not so much in this case, but risk of exploitation, although there is things like county lines. You know, we need to consider the risk of exploitation. proximity to other facilities, which are other children's homes and local criminal hotspots, for example. Environmental hazards such as motorways, ponds, rivers, you name it, something that could cause significant harm to children and young people. Neighbourhood suitability, the area should support children's growth and development, which, you know, some would argue rural locations are questionable when it comes to young people, especially children that have been in a city environment and suddenly find themselves in a rural location. And then obviously the crucial one for me is availability of local services. Okay, so it's okay sitting and citing young people in very rural locations, but they need to have access to suitable local leisure facilities, faith facilities, cultural facilities, healthcare services. You know, it's an endless list really when you're talking about young people. I see no evidence in this report. I see no evidence of this in the CYP report. And if we're going to plough significant amounts of money into these locations, surely that, you know, they've got to tick the right boxes for a child to thrive, really. So that's the question I've got to you, Chair.
Is there an officer response?
Yeah, I can answer hopefully some of that question. So the tender, when it goes to market, to the providers, we did a couple of rounds of market engagement beforehand just to sound out the market. Would they be interested if we either used our own properties, bought properties in the area to drive sufficiency? And one of these properties we went through at length with the provider market here. In fact, we invited them in and we sort of did a internal location risk assessment to say, what do you think? Are these going to be suitable? Would they work for our more higher needs young people, not our most complex, but our more higher needs that require space to pace, as we refer to it as, and would this be suitable? So it was favourably seen by the provider market, who said yes. There's a couple of risks which we identified in that meeting, but none that they didn't think couldn't be addressed. So fencing around the property, that kind of thing, would be suitable. And then one of the questions when we go out to tender is for a location risk assessment to be completed by the bidder. They will all be come through and they will go through the full evaluation process for us to review prior to evaluation.
If I might add as well, when we started this project, you know, several months ago, we initially were asked to look for properties in the market that we could buy. So we identified a lot of houses in housing developments, and very quickly when we were talking to the director and other members of the service, it became clear that they didn't want a house surrounded by other houses. For these particular children that they have in care, they were wanting a house that wasn't overlooked. And although I've said these houses are remote, they are actually probably about a mile out of Soham. The other thing is we scoured around our own properties and we put forward 5 or 6 properties. A number of those were discounted because of proximity to the A14, etc., too close to other houses and so on. So exactly the points that the councillor raised.
Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you. I get that, and I appreciate you can't answer all the points that I've brought up, but I think, you know, this committee needs to be clear that, you know, whatever location, if we choose to push down this route, that these are locations that enable. Let's not forget about it. This is about the young people. Okay, it's okay picking locations, but, you know, I want assurance that, you know, any young person who's put in any location around Cambridgeshire and these 2 locations, that they're able to thrive. And for me, availability of services for young people is crucial, really. But yeah, I take your point, but I'd like to be assured that that's going to be done properly.
The other point I probably make is these are only 2 houses. We have many more children who require accommodation. So this is to some extent a pilot. We are looking at a second phase of properties, and they would be for children who need to be right in the thick of it, close to services, etc., etc. So there are different categories that we'll be considering.
Councillor Bywater.
Yes, just finally, Chair. But I guess there's going to be a change of use in these properties. So there's a planning process that goes through this. And can I just also fire another warning shot over your bow, really, is that, I've seen 3 residential properties in my own ward from various agencies around the country. There's some issues that you'll have to tackle through the planning process of change of use and with local residents.
I think Councillor Bywater has raised some very good points, though, about the importance for children to thrive and how that it would be extreme. It is important that is in reports, either the one that comes to the Assets and Procurement Committee or the one that goes to children and young people. Councillor Nessinger.
Thank you. I think Councillor Bywater's questions and concerns about the care of young people are very helpful. I wondered whether Lucy would be able to give us a little bit more information about the, I know that this accommodation is planned for some of the children that we have in our care. I wonder if it would be possible for you to give us a little bit more information about the specific types of need that this accommodation is designed to help with, which might help make it clear why these locations are particularly appropriate. Thank you.
Yeah, so we did some extensive reviews on this in terms of where our young people currently are placed and where we've had some issues with young people absconding or not being in the right location because placements have been difficult to source for their specific needs, and they've perhaps been placed in locations that are not suitable for them. Smaller houses, for example. When I say pace to space, a space to pace, apologies, that's where some young people require bigger areas, bigger garden space out in the greenery. Some of our young people have told us they want to be around animals and support with that, so that they are almost they've got that time to kind of recover. The service providers that we are engaging at the moment, we're working with kind of a national specification of requirements to make sure that those children can thrive, so that when they're cared for by those support providers, that they've got every opportunity to meet their best need for what they need for those young people. And although the properties have got bed spaces available of 5 combined, we've modelled it on the basis of occupancy of probably no more than 3, possibly 4 at any one time for those young people. And as they progress and go through the system, there'll be opportunities potentially for them to move on to more suitable accommodation that could be shared, for example.
So the expectation is that this is for young people who have who are, for example, dealing with trauma, and they wouldn't necessarily be placed there for the very long term.
Yeah, and it depends. It really depends on each young person's needs and their support requirements and how they get on in that provision, I guess. But yes, absolutely. The plan is to get them to a place, to promote those young people, to get them to a place of stability, being far more comfortable in their surroundings, to be able to move on to bigger settings, potentially with lots of other children potentially around them, or in a location that's a bit more suitable for them.
The Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Look, I applaud what's trying to be done here. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction, but a couple of potential barriers in the way that I just want confirmation that we've looked at, and they may be rather simplistic, but I'll make no apologies for that. When you're looking at nearly £1 million budget for refurbing old buildings, was any consideration given to the land mass that we've got of building a specific site, which is often easier and cheaper to build to modern specifications rather than trying to refurb a farmhouse? The second consideration is, what if planning permission isn't attained? What is the next plan? Because there's no guarantee that tied farmhouses to a farm, which will probably come with an agricultural tie on them, will be released. In fact, recent history in Soham was that a request to do so was turned down. So I am a little bit concerned that all our eggs are in one basket here if we don't get the planning permission required. So on both aspects, please, if I can have an answer.
So the second one first. I mean, if we do, only one of the houses has an occupancy restriction, and what we're applying to do is to have it frozen for a number of years. If we don't get planning for change of use, we would be back to the plan that we started with first of all, which would be to look to buy suitable properties in the market. Construction of houses I think that is something that is very much worth considering. And as I said, this is a pilot with just 2. There are many more children who will require care, and that's something that we should be considering, looking at sites and perhaps building alongside purchasing houses in the market.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. That's somewhat reassuring. I think it would be more than sensible to review the build approach to this. As I say, the cost to refurb and get to modern standards of insulation and everything are often prohibitive in existing buildings, as opposed to a fresh green or a brownfield site. And you're also helping planning numbers as well if we build. But don't underestimate here. Even if there's an occupancy thing, you'll still have to apply for a change of use, I would have thought, because it's going to a commercial enterprise as opposed to a standard housing rental situation.
Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you, Chair. I hesitate slightly to offer an opinion on this on the basis that I'm only subbing and for the first time at that. But interesting though the discussion is not the remit of this committee simply to deal with the disposal or not of the assets of the authority, rather than looking into the details of either the planning issues or what it is being used for in the greater picture of looking after children.
I think you had a good point, Councillor Kindersley. Does anybody else have any questions? Councillor Ferguson.
It's on a similar point. So the report obviously describes the benefit to young people in the county, understanding Councillor Bywater's very legitimate concerns. The financial case is quite clear, but I'm slightly worried, and I'm not an expert on this at all, about the erosion of our rural estate. We have a county farms working group, and this decision seems to be taken along the lines of children and young people, assets and procurement, but there's no voice here from the county farms working group talking about whether this is if we're damaging our ability to house people working in agriculture in country locations. And so that's a slight concern to me, and I would have preferred to hear from them and their opinions on this before we had to look at it. Thank you.
John, is there any view from the county farms officers?
The houses, as I said, aren't required for the use of the farm. The farms, the land around has been amalgamated into a larger farm when the last tenant retired, so the house is surplus. One of the difficulties we have is the houses are right in the middle of a large block, and we would prefer not to sell them. So this is a good use, while the council has ownership of it, to make full use of it for other council services. And it's in no way impeding the use of the farms as farms or the growth of the farms estate. They're not required for farming.
Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you for allowing me to come back in. There was a point I forgot. In full awareness of Councillor Kindersley's point, it may not be that applicable, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And that is on the procurement side of these things. Can consideration be given, please, to the use of local resources for the work? I.e., when we were actually procuring this, there are plenty of builders in the Soham area, and it always seems crazy to me that I see vans are working in Soham with St Neots and Huntingdon written on them, and vans in St Neots with Soham written on them. And I always wonder how building companies do that and why they can't get the work locally. So I think if any consideration could be given there to local people that are on our paid register, I think it would make sense to do so.
So I'll note that point and take it away.
Sorry?
I was going to move the recommendation.
Yes. So the committee is asked to agree to the use of 2 council properties from the council's rural estate by the Children in Care Residential Service for a period of up to 10 years, and to delegate responsibility for awarding and executing construction contracts in 2024 to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources in consultation with the chairs and vice chairs of the following committees: Children and Young People, Assets and Procurement Committees, and Strategies, Resources and Performance. Does anybody have any objections? In which case, we'll take that as carried unanimously. Item number 5, Enterprise Resource Planning System Cloud Hosting. Can I ask Tom Kelly, Service Director for Finance and Procurement, to present this report, which is on page 23 of your agenda pack?
Good morning, Chair. So I should just introduce my colleague who sat alongside me, Sean Fennings, who's a Programme Manager at West Northamptonshire Council, and will be helping you with any of your more technical queries. I should also just draw the committee's attention. The vast majority of this report is in the public pack, but there is a confidential appendix, which if the committee wants to discuss, obviously we'll have to move into private. So this report is about the council system ERP Gold. It's our enterprise resource planning system, known more widely as Business World, but within both Cambridgeshire and actually the councils we manage and operate this system with, which is Milton Keynes City Council and the West Northamptonshire Council and the North Northamptonshire Council as ERP Gold. It's a very important system for the council, both to our operations and governance and reporting. It's how we use it to pay our staff, pay our suppliers, whether they be kind of small local childminders or international multinational companies, and use it as well for receiving income, managing client contributions for social care. We've had the system in place since 2018. Broadly speaking, it's a reliable and effective system, and members who were with the council at that time will remember it was a major project to implement. And the council enjoys perpetual long-term licenses for the system into the future. This report arises due to a change in the kind of commercial approach of the overarching supplier for the system. So the council has for several years had the product hosted in the cloud, but via a third-party supplier. And the development that the councils collectively have been grappling with is a change the supplier wishes to implement in terms of having hosting directly with them rather than through third parties. So then the report kind of proceeds to explain the approach across 3 phases. So there's the immediate phase. So how do the councils make sure that they have arrangements for ongoing continuity of service? And that takes us up to spring 2026. Pleased to say the full council's acting very closely together and in lockstep, but led by West Northamptonshire Council as the contracting authority for this product, have negotiated that immediate extension through to 2026, which buys some period of time. The second phase is then the medium term, and the primary decision this report is focused on, so the period between 2026 and 2029. And then there are long-term considerations as well beyond 2029. And the report broadly then, I don't intend to proceed through them, but sets out various options that have been considered, both in the medium term and the longer term. And it's fair to say those are around different degrees of separations of aspects of the system or various forms of kind of outsourcing or reliance on different parties. Just in relation to the long term, first of all, the report there essentially on page 31 sets out the considerations which will need to be given to this, and proposes that we now undertake kind of a strategic review to prepare for that phase after 2029. These are important systems and will have to be carefully planned depending on the degree of change at that stage. But returning to the main focus of the report, which is the medium term, we set out the procurement implications, and the report sets out that a compliant procurement route has been identified to maintain access to the existing ERP system, and that West Northamptonshire Council will continue to be the lead authority for that service. It recites the legal advice that's been received both on the situation we found ourselves in and the procurement route we're proposing to follow. And it also recaps the financial position. And for Cambridgeshire, that's summarised in the in section 6.1. As you will see, we're forecasting a pretty close to on budget position over the coming years ahead. I think that's all I wanted to say in introduction. Thank you, Chair.
Sean, would you like to add anything?
Nothing to what Tom's already said.
Councillor Bowden.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'll be careful to restrict all my comments to what is in the public paper. I won't make any reference to anything else. I have to say I was quite astonished when I read this this paper at the decision which we find ourselves forced to take as a result of the supplier's de-support announcement. And I understand the legal advice that we've been given so far as that potential breach of contract is concerned. And I trust that that will be pushed forward as solidly as possible in order to get recompense for what looks at face value to be a significant breach of contract. I was the chairman of the LGSS at the time that the decision was made to go down the shared service route with lead service providers. And this particular service was passed over to Northamptonshire, and then after the reorganisation has gone to West Northamptonshire. And I must admit, as far as that breach of contract is concerned, I'm assuming that the contract now lies in the name of the lead provider, which is West Northamptonshire. So they will be the ones who are responsible for doing all of the necessary negotiations and, if necessary, threats of legal action, and that the other partners will get a share of any recompense which there may be if it is shown that there has been a breach of contract. I'm assuming that's the case, and I'd just be grateful if that were to be confirmed. And my understanding from reading the paper is that, at least in the short to medium term, we are talking about a continuation of the shared service model, whereby West Northamptonshire should continue to be the lead provider for the other three authorities. And I must admit that I believe that that would be the appropriate way of going about doing things because of the economies of scale which are involved and the stronger negotiating position that we collectively would find ourselves in. And that is why I was really puzzled by recommendation B, because recommendation B delegates responsibility to award and execute a contract starting in April 2025 to the Executive Director for Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. And unless I could well have completely misunderstood this, and if so, please do correct me, but surely the responsibility, the actual awarding of and executing of the contract will be for West Northamptonshire to do, not for our authority to do. And therefore, the procedures which have been set up for the shared service, the lead provider model, they are the ones which should be followed. So it's not a matter for us agreeing to award and execute a contract. It surely should be a matter in recommendation B to delegate responsibility for agreeing what West Northamptonshire is going to do. So I'd be grateful for some clarification on those 2 points, please, Chair.
So just to clarify, the 2 points are the legal approach and about recommendation B.
Yes, thank you. So I can confirm that West Northamptonshire Council are the lead as the contract authority, have led on the commercial negotiations. There are now quite long-standing and well-established mechanisms for cost sharing. So both costs, any rebate, will be divided through the through that mechanism. I think there is more in the appendix about that, or a sort of an insight into it. It's so grateful for Councillor Bowden's point. I think what he's driving at, though, is covered off in the other recommendation. So recommendation A does clearly set out that West Northamptonshire Council will be the lead contracting authority, and recommendation C refers to the kind of the inter-authority agreements. I think what we were trying to achieve in recommendation B was ensuring a Cambridgeshire chief officer had sufficient authority to either delegate on further to West Northamptonshire Council or make other minor variations as this progresses. So that's why it's been drafted in that way.
I think that seems quite sensible, because even if West Northamptonshire are doing the negotiation, there is a point at which Cambridgeshire can say that they are not happy with it. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair. I still think, to be honest, recommendation B is misleading. And what the responsibility you are delegating is, in fact, to the way in which the contract will be awarded and executed. And that's a perfectly reasonable delegation, but not to actually award and delegate the contract. That's not what we in Cambridgeshire County Council will be doing. That is what West Northamptonshire will be doing. And that is not what recommendation B actually says.
Councillor Ferguson.
So I share Councillor Bowden's concern. When I read this paper, I was staggered that the timescales being put in place by an enterprise software provider, and I work in enterprise software, to end of life a significant product with about or just over 12 months notice seems incredibly unreasonable. And one of the reasons why enterprise software providers don't behave like that is because every time you're going to have to move from an on-premises solution to the cloud, that's going to cause a massive amount of upheaval. I don't think anybody understands how much, and that's generally considered as a good time to consider other solutions. And so we seem to be suggesting various, different ways of keeping the same provider when they appear to have been acting awfully. Is ERP Gold also, is that the name of the software? Because there is a ERP provider called ERP Gold. It says in the paper it's a local name. Are we talking about a large cloud provider? Because actually the other question here is, if we're going to be moving all of our proprietary data onto a public cloud, I would want to have confidence that that's a significant kind of player like an SAP or a Workday and not some smaller organization, because I think security is a big issue here as well. Thank you.
Yep, so I can comment on that a bit, and Sean may want to add as well. So the product we receive is already in the cloud. So what the supplier has taken the commercial position to do, and it is quite a boisterous position, to kind of put it mildly, is to cut out that third-party supplier. The ERP Gold is our local name for the product, but it is a major supplier that operates across the UK, elsewhere in the public sector, and more broadly in at least in Northern Europe, and I think around the world. This is, as Councillor Bowden was referring to, it has been helpful for us using our collective buying power as all four councils to negotiate and receive concessions from that supplier. But I think the points Councillor Ferguson makes about the supplier's behaviour are well made, and we're very conscious about that in terms of considering our position. We're having to balance that around continuity of supply and the timescales it would take to consider our options more broadly. I think is the balance the report's trying to strike. Sean, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Just to add to the point about the suitability of the cloud environment that we're looking to move to, that is actually provided by Microsoft. It's Microsoft Azure, so it's probably one of the most robust cloud technologies in the world. So it comes with appropriate resilience. We have been and we will be continuing to actually undertake due diligence on that solution. So we're going through the exercise at the moment as part of pre-procurement to ensure that it is fit for purpose for us.
Councillor Ferguson.
I've also got an observation about the comment in the report that Microsoft Azure's cloud services are carbon neutral, which is true only in the sense that they offset the mass. Obviously, any cloud computing solution requires massive amounts of electricity, massive amount of water for cooling. And so it is true. And I guess it's inevitable. There's not much we can do about it because most things are moving to the cloud. But I think that the claims that it's somehow carbon friendly it's only true because, they're potentially offsetting it with planting forests or whatever. And it's not. It's still always going to be a very carbon intensive solution. That's all. But it's not one that we can avoid. So.
Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of observations. Firstly, from a personal perspective, I cannot believe I'm still being haunted by the implications of the existence of LGSS. Councillor Bowden and I spent many happy hours, I'm being slightly sarcastic if I'm honest, at Angel Pavement, just as the building was finished and then immediately sold, which is why we have two Northamptonshire councils now. The second point, just to give Councillor Bowden some comfort, perhaps, is a suggestion that we add for the county council's part to recommendation B after the words enterprise resource planning system, if that's going to make it clearer from a public perspective. And thirdly, although I'm going to support the recommendations, I do so somewhat grudgingly, because I do feel that we are rewarding the failure/refusal of a company to honour a contract in which we all entered with our eyes open for better or worse. But that being the case, and on the basis that there are a lot of people involved in this report who know a great deal more about it than I do, the subject generally making me want to gouge my own eye out, I will, as I say, support the recommendation. But I would like to make it, I would like it noted that I do feel that we are rewarding some fairly poor behaviour.
Councillor Nessinger.
Thank you. I'm going to add to the general sense of disgust that a company has decided to treat a contract in this way. We are clearly in a slightly less bad position. I mean, I have no great love of LGSS. I will definitely say that at this point, having also spent hours dealing with it a long time ago. But in this case, I think the fact that we are four councils working together probably has been helpful in negotiating with this enormous company. My question really is whether other councils are also in the same position, and whether we have been investigating whether other councils are in the same position, and whether there is anything to be gained by having a broader conversation with our council colleagues about the way in which councils are being treated by international companies. Thank you.
So I think Sean may want to come in on this as well, but I understand we do liaise closely with other councils in a similar position. So the supplier has taken the same approach across the whole sector. So it has impacted a number of councils and universities. I think they're quite a large supplier too as well. We have what I would say about our approach is we've absolutely made sure that we can propose a compliant procurement approach. That's been an important aspect for all of the councils, and that's what you have in front of you. Sure.
Just to add to what Tom's just said, we have been in touch with a number of local authorities. Unit 4, the supplier, have actually provided the solution. It's not just to the UK market, it's Europe and also the US. So all customers have been told the same. We do believe, based on discussions that we've had, that our commercial discussions that we are still having with the supplier are proven to be favourable.
Councillor King.
Thank you. I was going to talk about Microsoft claims on carbon, but thanks, Councillor Ferguson has covered that. I think one thing I wanted to just ask, well, actually two things. The first one is the security assessment. So I do understand Microsoft Azure is secure, but the it would be good to see kind of what what has been put in place to ensure security during the transfer from one cloud to the other. And also keeping on that subject, also fully understand the economies of scale of sharing the data between several councils, but does it also have a sort of heightened security risk as such? So that's one thing. And the other thing is, would that switch have any impact on people operating the system and therefore potential impact on processing claims and paying people and so on and so forth? Thank you.
Because we've been operating a solution currently right now in a cloud environment, all of the security side and assessment that we've been through previously with our current supplier, we will repeat that with Unit 4's cloud solution, and we'll undertake a full security assessment. We've already started that process as part of our pre-procurement exercise. We are actually having a dedicated cloud solution with Unit 4. So we're not going into their public cloud, which is shared. This will be dedicated for us only. So we will have specific access to specific hardware that will be dedicated to us. So no one else will be able to get access to that hardware. Again, that's exactly the same position that we're currently in now with our current provider. In respect to access to the system as a shared service, we already have appropriate levels of security in place in respect to access to the system. So only users get access to the data they're allowed to get access to, whether that's within their own authority or if they're working within a shared service team, they may be able to access data across authorities. But that's a specific layer of security that we take seriously in the system, and that's already set up and in place.
Does anybody else have a question or item for debate? Councillor Machini.
I am sorry, I feel a bit silly. I was kind of hoping that the discussion would answer this, and if it has, I am sorry. But I was thinking mostly about section 3.4, where it talks about the legal case. So it seems that the legal case is, despite the fact that there's been an announcement of the end of support, there is not going to be a breach of contract until the end of support actually happens. I assume that the unspoken conclusion is that if before that date occurs, we are in a different contract, that will disappear. And you are no longer going to be able to sue the people for a breach of contract that you're no longer in. So essentially, you only have maybe possibly a legal case if your bomb is on the ground. Is that correct? Including the bomb part.
I think it's probably difficult to answer that question without going to the sort of prospects of success on that point, which is, it's probably more for the confidential system. I think the other complication I would refer to, though, is although we've got perpetual licenses for the product, which is the breach, potentially, the part of the issue here is the hosting, and it's that mechanism that's kind of been disrupted. So I think what I would say in general terms is we have very closely explored the legal routes, including with an external advisor, and we'll continue to look at that and ensure collectively we secure the appropriate commercial solution.
Just as a very quick follow-up, I mean, I completely accept that answer. I think it's completely fair enough. For my own feeding, my own internal anger, I think the answer to my question is yes. So you essentially have to let your users, your customers, the people that you're looking after, let them all down in order to have a legal case, which is a slight problem. And I have a feeling that's probably one of very many such occurrences where commercial companies know they have us over a barrel, and it's, not just this, it's so many all across our areas of service. I mean, I think we've lost count by this point. But as to what we are doing to make sure that, because our primary responsibility is the people that we look after, I mean, I am very satisfied we've done everything we can, and thank you. I hate it.
Does anybody else have any questions? So I think we all share disappointment with the behaviour of the contractor, who really has operated in an extremely cynical manner. I would like to propose an amendment as suggested by Councillor Kindersley to recommendation B, if I can have a proposer and a seconder. So the suggested amendment is delegate responsibility for the county council's part in awarding and executing a contract for the provision of enterprise resource planning systems starting April 2025 and extension periods to the Executive Director for Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. So it's the addition of the words for the county council's part. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Bowden.
Sorry, I'm happy to second. I think that Councillor
Councillor
Kinsley is
Kinsley will
already.
propose. Councillor Bowden will second. Are we in support of that? Thank you. So the committee is asked to A, approve recommended option to commence procurement of enterprise resource planning system cloud hosting through the lead authority shared service arrangements with West Northamptonshire Council as the lead contracting authority. B, delegate responsibility for the county council's part for awarding and executing a contract for the provision of enterprise resource planning systems starting April 2025 and extension periods to the Executive Director for Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. And C, delegate authority to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair to agree for the County Council's part to any minor variations that may arise during the progression of this proposal and to agree to any revised or updated inter-authority agreements that result. Are we in support of these recommendations? Thank you. I will take that as carried. Item number 6, Corporate Performance Report. Can I ask Michael Hudson, Executive Director for Finance and Resources, to present this report, which is on page 35 of your agenda pack?
Thank you, Chair. The report, as stated, covers Q1 of 24-25. And as per the table at paragraph 3.1, we have 3 red indicators, 2 amber, 2 green, 3 blue, blue being greater than 5% better than expected performance. Of the red indicator 169 relates to contract waivers. We'll talk about contracts and breaches in the next item, but whilst it's disappointing to see that the volume of waivers has increased, the value, 17 of the 20 waivers approved were less than 30,000. So I think what we're seeing is we are seeing the training of officers impacting in terms of the higher value contracts, but for the lower value, we're still needing to make headway into that. And one of the points to note is that the Chief Executive has asked for further inspection of these, and we'll be undertaking that for a period. Now, in relation to one of the others, key indicator 204, there is slippage in the gross income from the commercial income, but there is more detail in the appendices on those, and happy to take questions in a moment. The report also contains a number of key performance indicators, paragraph 3.4, page 38 onwards, relating to the performance of the corporate property team. And I'm happy, I can see that I've got Claire and Chris at the back of the room who can help me with any questions from the committee.
Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Netzinger.
Thank you. My question is about the rent per acre one, which I know has been consistently above target for a long time. And I know that there's an explanation in the paper about that and the work that's going on to look at that indicator and to find an alternative way of managing it, all of which is good, and it's very helpful to have that laid out in the report. I just wanted to be reassured that those discussions which are going on about changes to that indicator are including the County Farms Working Group. And I know there's been a certain amount of concern that that working group hasn't been meeting quite as often as it should be, and I was hoping you could reassure me that that is also being looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, if I may shamelessly also remind members that there is a rural farms training and update session for all members available tomorrow. Then I will use that plug as well. And in that, we will also be affirming that the working group is part of the process within this, and there is a working group due to take place before December. I can't actually remember the date, but I will email round to all members the exact date of that. And this is being looked at as part of that, yes.
Councillor Goldsack.
May I drill down on the 3.4.3 fire risk assessment issue, where we couldn't get into two sites to do the assessment? And could I have some indication as to what kind of sites they are? Me thinking that if they're a school, that's a worry. That's where I'm coming from.
Through you, Chair, I haven't got the details unless Chris does have the details. I will need to provide that in a written answer, but Chris?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, there were two libraries, not schools, who couldn't get access because they were closed. In terms of the risk assessed on those two, obviously this is a rolling 3-year programme. So in effect, the fire risk assessment is still valid. There is a fire risk assessment in place that people are working to.
If I can come back through you, Chair. Thank you for the information. I think that's quite enlightening that we've got library buildings that are our own that we can't get into is somewhat of a concern. I find that, well, I shouldn't find it humorous, but I rather do. I think we ought to be able to get into our own libraries when we need to get into them. So I think further work. My risk there is we've got 13, 13, 13 for the next 4 quarters. We missed 2 or 3 of those as well. And then suddenly we're running at almost an annual quarter's worth of reviews that are going to be outstanding. So it doesn't sit well. Let's leave it at that. It doesn't sit well.
Chris, would you like to come back?
Yeah, thanks. Just to confirm, those 2 that are missing from Q1 were carried out within the first week of Q2.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair, and I won't try and get double helping on this one. I'm not going to raise it at the next agenda item, but we do have indicator 169 about the contract waivers, and you will be aware, Chair, and Lucy will be aware before that, when Strategy and Resources used to deal with this, that it is a subject which I've raised on maybe more than one occasion. And the Chief Executive has been very supportive when I've raised this in the past because he recognises and recognised that it's a matter of the culture of the organisation. It's not merely a matter of following rules and regulations, but it's a matter of how the organisation works. I did request at a previous meeting that we were given more indication as to the value of the failures rather than just the number. And I'm grateful we've been given an indication about that. And it really does help because it shows that we're not necessarily talking about something with a major financial implication, but it does come back to this point of culture. And action was taken by the Chief Executive in establishing a procurement pipeline so that it was going to be possible gradually over time to get more and more procurements within the required period so far as any action is concerned, including waivers. Now, it's an unfortunate fact, Chair, that we will never get to a situation where all procurement will take place within the prescribed times and all waivers will take place within the prescribed time, because things do go wrong and sometimes it's necessary to take action and sometimes it's even necessary to take action later than we're meant to take it. But we should gradually have been getting better and better, going towards zero, even if not getting to zero. Yet we see the trend, we're getting worse and worse. And for 58% of total waivers being submitted late is worrying, I have to say. Now, I fully accept the amounts of money. We now see the amounts of money involved are small in terms of the procurements. So I'm not making a financial issue here. What I am raising is the issue of the culture within the organisation. It is entirely appropriate, to my mind, that the Chief Executive has reintroduced his personal monthly review of performance in this area, but the culture of the organisation has to be led by the head of paid service and by the leader of the council. And I don't know why it's gone wrong. And I wonder if through you, Chair, if the leader of the council can tell us why is it going in the wrong direction, because it should have been going in the right direction based on the actions which have been taken. Thank you, Chair.
Can I suggest we get an officer response first and then move to the leader of the council?
Through you, Chair. I think there's a number of things to say, and Claire, by all means, if you want to jump in. Firstly, the actual recording of waivers and the recognition of the actual recording of waivers is good practice, as Councillor Bowden noted. And what I can say is, we're capturing that, and actually the capturing of that is not to be discouraged. We don't want to get to a scenario whereby, we're under-reporting. So actually the honesty and the forthright ability to monitor these numbers is to be applauded, and something I've not seen at other authorities when attempting to do similar sorts of exercises here. So I think that's encouraging, and as such, we will see blips, ups and downs. Partly, sometimes that might be through emergent situations and explainable. And here, what we're looking at is, the value of the waivers is significantly lower, and they are carried out and processed through more junior officers. And I think what we've done is we've cascaded a range of training. We have developed further the organisation. We've developed further the processes around the higher value contracts, and that has worked well and is shown. But there is more to do on this. I don't think anybody would shirk away from that position, and that's where Claire and her team are continuing to drive this. It has been a difficult 6 months doing that alongside a number of the large contracts, plus the introduction of the Procurement Act, or the Deferred Procurement Act implementation now. But it's something that we fully recognise and will continue to report on, and therefore the hope is that will be addressed. And I think knowing that is reported to a committee such as this gives us a greater emphasis in terms of those discussions that Claire and the team have, then not only with the junior officers but with the executive directors, and this obviously is picked up at our corporate leadership team, which is the chief exec, monitoring officer, the executive director. So it's something we are paying a very close attention to. It's quite a long answer. I'm not sure, Claire, if there's anything you wanted to add in terms of the specifics.
I suppose the only other thing I would add is that we've recently received an internal audit report on waivers, and there were a number of recommendations, including specific training for teams who regularly submit late waivers, and the logging of individuals who I would say are repeat offenders. So we are now logging that across all of the late waivers received, and we will be providing specific training. There were a number of other recommendations about further guidance in the waiver system, etc., as well, which we're implementing at the moment.
Councillor Nessinger.
Thank you. And I'm very grateful to Michael and Claire for their thorough response on that. I think what I would say is that I am really pleased that our senior team at the council are taking this incredibly seriously. And I'm really pleased that the next report we have for this committee is also about procurement compliance, and that we are slowly changing the culture so that there is clarity about what the procurement rules are, and not only is there clarity at the senior level, but kind of all the way down through the organisation. I think that's really important, and it absolutely has my full personal support and the support of the Joint Administration. What I will say, Councillor Bowden, is that I absolutely welcome your scrutiny on this issue now. If there'd been a bit more of this kind of scrutiny 4 or 5 years ago, we might not be having so much difficulty turning this culture around.
Councillor Bowden.
It does become a bit lame more than 3 years after the last county council elections for the leader of the council to start to try to defend failings within her own time as being something to do with the previous administration. And I say that because this is not a new issue to have been raised at this committee or at Strategy and Resources before, nor has the importance of it been ignored by officers or by members. And action had been taken by officers, particularly the chief executive, and particularly the institution of the procurement pipeline work, action had been taken to address this very problem. Yet somehow we are now seeing a trend, because this isn't the first quarter where things have got worse. This is a continuation of a decline in these numbers. We see it going in the wrong direction when it should be going in the right direction, given the work which has been done by officers. Now, as I said before, I'm very pleased that we're given some numerical figures here in terms of financial value. I think that's massively helpful to make sure that we are assured that the bigger procurements aren't systemically going wrong. I think that's really helpful to see. But it still begs the question, which wasn't answered by anyone, why have we had now, over the last 2 quarters, a continuing decline in something which we should have been seeing an improvement in, given the work which has already been done by the chief executive and by others? So I'd really be interested to know, because I'm sure that the question has been considered by officers, and I've got a feeling that Michael has got a good answer here.
I won't comment on the quality of my answer. That's for you to judge. What I would say is that clearly a lot of focus has been put on that high value and the pipeline. The procurement team supports contracts above £100,000, and that's where the focus is in terms of the level of capacity of that resource. The usual length of a contract is between 3 and 7 years. So what we're seeing is, there will be spikes in time, be that, post-COVID award or pre-COVID award, where contracts will be coming for renewal, and officer changeover through either decoupling with Peterborough or change of responsibilities means that these things are coming too late. And I think that's what we're seeing at the moment, is some of the lower value contracts that people just assumed carried on, and maybe those officers have inherited or not sure of the timescale in that handover from other officers because of the time that has surpassed, means that they're then coming to this and finding the issues that we're finding. But that's one of the kind of anecdotes in terms of looking at the waivers that are occurring over the last couple of quarters. And again, it is a cultural thing, but it's also a discipline thing. But you need to have the information and the awareness, so both the training, but also to understand the contracts. And it's no excuse, but officers have busy schedules, and if they've just simply inherited it and they've not done that due diligence, when it suddenly happens, it's throwing it into waivers. So it is better preparation, better understanding, better planning of time throughout this. So it's continually taking the lessons from each of the waivers and the compliance issues in the next report and feeding that back into the organisation, given that churn of contract officers and managers that the organisation has seen in the last few years.
Quickly, Councillor Bowden.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't want to make a meal of this, and I fully accept all the comments which have been made. I'm certainly not going to give a score to Michael for his answer. I think that's inappropriate. But I did hear one thing within that report, that comment just made by Michael, which I may or may not have misunderstood. I got the impression, when talking about the distinction between contracts of more than 100,000 and less than 100,000, I got the impression, and I could be wrong, that the procurement pipeline work which was done was based on procurements over 100,000, not ones below 100,000. Am I wrong to have, because if so, it's the first I've heard of it, am I wrong to have assumed that from what Michael said, because he didn't say that explicitly? If that is the case, then that can be a major explanation as to why we're seeing the numbers that we're seeing here. It's not an excuse, but it could be a major explanation. So was the procurement pipeline for all procurement, or merely for procurement which was over 100,000?
Claire, it's over, but Claire can. Do you want to?
Yeah, sorry, we only plan procurements as a team. So the procurement pipeline covers our work as a team, which is procurements valued over 100,000.
Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you. I thought this was a really interesting report for reasons I'll come on to. But first of all, I'd like, if anybody knows, how often is a waiver request actually denied?
fairly regularly. We are, as a group of approvers, fairly regularly denying retrospective waivers which don't meet the criteria. And I think more and more waivers are being questioned earlier on in the process. So there is a fuller spreadsheet, and you will see a reject appearing more and more often.
Thank you. So those denials, do they take place within the 5 days before the commencement of the contract?
Yes, they will do, depending on how fast the waivers got through the system.
Because what I took away from this was that the declining performance was as a result of much closer scrutiny of the process and much greater involvement in the process by various people. Because apart from anything else, the report does mention that approval needs to be obtained from various officers dependent on the value of the waiver.
Yes, that's true. So if the waiver's valued under 25,000, it only needs approval from the executive director. Over 25,000, it comes to myself and the service director for finance. And then over 100,000, it goes to the monitoring officer as well.
So there's really quite a considerable amount of scrutiny for each and every single one that comes through. Councillor MacDonald whispered to me asking, what do you think the £25,000 contract might be for? And we're sort of assuming emergency accommodation, renewal of taxi, school transport contracts, that sort of thing.
I'd have to take that away, I'm afraid, and provide an answer.
No, don't worry. It was only out of interest. So what this report says is that at the moment we are going through the process of tightening up the entire structure around procurement. And by the way, I thought the online training was really interesting about the Procurement Act. And so it is going to, whilst people get used to the whole system, it is going to throw up what I would regard as anomalous results. But I do think that the fact that the chief executive has now gone back to his monthly monitoring will sharpen up everyone's appetite for getting it right first time round.
Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I just want to again bring a point to bear on. At CYP last week, a agreement was reached to double the sign-off allowance on contract value, which could have a knock-on effect of the risk indication. Of the risk of this indicator. Can I have assurances that will be looked at accordingly?
Through you, Chair, yes. The point has been raised with me. I've not got an answer as it sits here today, and I wasn't in that committee, but the point has been raised for me to look at.
Okay, back through you, Chair. I've had a response from the legal officer, which has just basically said what it says. All I want today here is that whatever that decision has been made, I believe it's a fair and right decision. What I'm saying is we're talking about contract waivers here and the impact. Like my colleague to the right here, I was very pleased to see the relative low value of these, but by doubling the amount of CYP ability for sign-off, we have now opened up the risk of contract waiver agreements to a higher value, so that could impact the risk.
Sorry, again, through you, Chair. I don't think that's the case, but I'll provide a written answer when I've looked at this in that. It doesn't certainly affect the contract waiver procedures, which are set by Claire and agreed by the statutory officers. So there is no change to those.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Bowden.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. Every day is a learning day for us, and even on the subject of procurement, that's certainly the case. A comment was made, and I just have to ask the question because I don't know the answer. We hear that there has been an increase in the number of retrospective waivers which have been denied. Now, on procurement, if there is a retrospective waiver, presumably the contract has already been entered into. So what is the implication, what is the meaning of a denial of a retrospective waiver? Does it mean that the contract itself is questioned in some way, or the procurement is questioned in some way, or is it merely an administrative matter?
It's often an administrative matter, but what's happened in the last couple is that we've picked them up through the breach process, which I'll come on to discuss in the next paper.
Thank you. Any further questions? In which case, members, we are invited to note performance information and act as necessary. Number 7, Procurement Compliance Report. Can I ask Claire Ellis, Head of Procurement, to present this report, which is on page 51 of your agenda pack?
Thanks, Chair. This paper provides an overview of the recent implementation of the breach process. So members will be aware that the Council's constitution includes a set of contract procedure rules, and I have worked with the monitoring officer to establish a breach process. So where officers are in not compliant with the contract procedure rules, they now report that non-compliance is a breach, which is investigated by myself and the head of internal audit where applicable. So this report covers the first 3 months of that breach process's implementation. Section 3 lists the breaches that have been reported so far, along with a summary, a very brief summary of the mitigations or the kind of overview of the mitigations that have been put in place. I'm happy to provide more information on each of the breaches if you would like that. But I think it's clear to me that whilst the breaches have been reported, I've worked with those officers reporting the breaches to ensure that both there is a relevant mitigation in place for that particular breach and that processes have been put in place to ensure that those specific breaches don't reoccur in those teams. Thank you, Chair.
Odin.
Thank you. I won't go back to the waiver issue. I read this with some astonishment, and my apologies to Lady Bracknell for my comment. But to have had one breach of the procurement regulation 2015 would be unfortunate. To have 2 seems to be careless. To have 3 makes it look as though there may be a systemic problem. And it's not just a tick box exercise, this. A breach of PCR 15 has potentially significant implications. It's possible within 30 days, or in some exceptional cases, 3 months, for an interested party to object and to cause the courts to get involved, and the courts may cause us to cancel a contract. The courts may issue fines, and those fines are said to be are meant to be commensurate with the desire to ensure that this doesn't happen again. So it really is quite serious to have a breach of the PCR 15, and I'm well aware that the new regulations which are coming in are much more stringent in many ways than PCR 15 was. So my first question would be, these figures were just for 3 months up to the end of June. Have there been further breaches of PCR 15 which have been found since the end of June 2024? And my second is, do we have breaches of procurement law as an identified risk somewhere in the risk management system? And who is looking at that? Who's got responsibility for monitoring that particular risk? Thank you, Chair.
Chair, through you, if I can kick off, and Claire may be able to clarify in terms of the post July onwards position, which will clearly be reported at future committees. I think the first thing to say, and it goes back to that cultural aspect, I can honestly say in my 30-odd year career, and that includes as a peer reviewer, I've not seen this level of transparency that the authority is providing here, that ensures that culture of compliance, as well as that culture of taking this seriously. I note that 3 of the 4 are legacy issues in terms of resolving that, and I think it is important that we're taking the lessons out of this to then drive through within that and make sure that, you know, as it says in all cases, that we're mitigating the position, and we're doing that correctly. So I think it is to be applauded that that's the case, and you know, there have been a number that have been stored up. This has been driven by the monitoring officer in terms of good compliance, and therefore that's why you're seeing this report here today. Claire, I'm not sure if there have been any breaches to report for the next quarter committee's report in terms of the current quarter as it is.
Further breaches have been reported. From memory, I think those are breaches of contract procedure rules rather than public contract regulations, but I can clarify that if required, or I can bring the next performance report at the next quarter.
Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you. Once again, obviously, the dementor that was LGSS floating above us, and hopefully that is all going to disappear sooner rather than later. I do understand Councillor Bowden's position, which is, you know, that it is serious to have a breach of the relevant legislation. But what would be much more serious is if we didn't know that we had breached the legislation, and that we then weren't able to demonstrate that we had a process in place to A, find out if there is an issue, and B, to then deal with the issue. And it appears to me that that is exactly what the committee has done by setting up the quarterly reporting and including a certain amount of detail in the report to committee. So I rather echo Mr. Hudson's words, which are that, you know, I have increasing confidence in the way the process is being delivered and the transparency of the process. And of course, as he remarks, and I noticed Councillor Bowden didn't rise to it on this occasion, 3 out of the 4 were legacy issues.
Councillor Nessinger.
Thank you. I wanted to pick up on the point about the breach of procurement law, because my recollection, and I may be wrong about this, is that this is relatively new legislation that we are having to comply with. If I'm wrong about that, then my question is not valid.
I can't clarify the date. 2015. It's so 10 years, within 10
Okay.
years. Yeah.
Well, in that case, my question is slightly different. It's interesting that you were saying that you haven't seen this level of transparency from other councils. Is there any possible way of finding out how other councils do on this process? Because I mean, one of the things that we've been quite keen to do across a number of areas is benchmarking where we are in comparison with other councils. It would be fascinating to find out how we compare on this as well.
Through you, Chair, I can certainly ask peer networks for those that do report. Clearly, the devil is in the detail in terms of the dive through, in terms of anybody that is reporting as to why and what the causes are, but also likewise those that are reporting whether there is actually the same level of compliance and inspection that's being given to this. So, you know, 0 responses may give you a different indication than full compliance. Actually, it may not be something that's being monitored. So yeah, but I'll take that away and ask peer networks.
Councillor King.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Are we ready for the new Procurement Act whenever that comes into place? I appreciate it's delayed, but would that bring new would it bring some implications to our current portfolio in any shape or form? Thank you.
So we are ready to go to Constitution and Ethics Committee later this month with a revised set of contract procedurals that will be compliant with the Procurement Act. Clearly, they won't come into force now until the 24th of February at the earliest. We've also got a full change management plan, which includes comms out to contract managers and commissioners so that they understand the implications. We're in the process of updating the training, which would have gone live next month, but which now won't go live until February. So I'm comfortable that we are as ready as we can be for the change when it happens. The one area that we remain kind of concerned about, I suppose, is the central government's find a tender service, which was due to go live on the same day as the Procurement Act was due to go live. We were hoping that it would still go live in October so we could see it ahead of February. We've now been told it will go live on the 24th of February, so the same day as the Procurement Act still. We still do have that as a risk in terms of any tenders that need to be published shortly after the February go live date. And we are talking to particularly smaller businesses about, you know, how they can prepare for registering on that new portal.
Councillor Bowden.
Thank you. Sorry to trouble you, Chair, but I did ask a second question which hasn't been answered, and that is, do we have a specific risk somewhere in the risk system about breaches of procurement law? And if so, who owns that, please?
Sorry, yes, apologies for that, Chair. Claire, do you want to pick that up?
There is a risk in the procurement and commercial team's risk register around non-compliance and challenge, and that's owned by myself.
Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. Just a quick one, and I largely welcome the report. Thank you very much. We have 3 yeses or nos, which is breach of CPRs, breach of procurement laws, adequate mitigations. Is the narrative on the adequate mitigations the second half of the brief descriptions? And if that is the case, why is there nothing in there for the post office situation? If that's not the case, does that be something that we have in future reports that tells us more about what the mitigations are so that we can better understand an area if we don't understand it at face value?
Yes, I'm happy to take that as an action.
So, sorry, which of my scenarios is correct?
Sorry, there is some detail in the brief description, but it doesn't always cover the mitigation. So I'll make sure that I provide that detail in that last column in a future report. Would you like me to update this table with the mitigations as an action?
Apologies, Chair. I think it would be useful. Well, it's just interesting to me that the Royal Mail has been paid to provide postal services. A particular situation has no mitigations in it. With no formal contract in place or procurement process being followed. It's a statement. There's no mitigation. There is a mitigation line of note in each of the other ones, but not in that one. So we're falling between 2 stools here. Well, I think we need to get it right. But I'll take you for future meetings. If we could have more information on the mitigations, it would be useful. Thank you.
Surely the answer is obvious from the brief description, which is, as there is no formal contract in place or procurement process being followed, there's now a procurement process being followed to get a contract in place. I mean, that would be the logical conclusion.
It's a good assumption.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Nessinger.
It's not a question. It's just a comment to say thank you very much for Claire for all the work that you're doing on this and for this report. It's received some scrutiny, but we are extremely grateful for all the work you're doing in the organisation, which I suspect is not always making you entirely popular with your colleagues. You have our full support in that work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In which case, members are invited to note the content of this report. We'll move on to item number 8. Contract management update. Can I ask Claire Ellis, Head of Procurement, to present this report, which is on page 757 of your agenda pack?
Thank you, Chair. I think it was an initial meeting of this committee some time ago that I was asked to provide some additional detail around the centralised contract risk assessment process. So the purpose of this report is to provide that additional detail. The central contract risk assessment work is a relatively new element of the work of the procurement and commercial team. For the most part, those risk assessments are undertaken when a contract is re-procured. So we will gradually build up a picture of risk assessments. Those for higher value, higher risk contracts have been done, have been undertaken proactively. And you will see from the report that the coverage of those is now at 92%. It's probably worth noting that the procurement and commercial team doesn't have a contract management a remit as such. So this report doesn't cover any risk assessments that individual contract managers will have in place for their own contracts. The paper summarises the classifications of the risk assessments that we undertake and the level of risk assessments that we've undertaken so far, and does cover a bit of a kind of summary of what we've found and the work that we're taking when we found any issues. I would say that the report also summarises the range of guidance and support that we provide as a central team to individual contract managers, and that includes training and support through the contract managers Teams channel. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Councillor MacDonald.
Not so much a question, Chair. It's just an observation. You know, from what I've seen both at this committee and before, first of all, the way we classify and the way we approach it, and the way that those significant contracts, especially in adult social care, are raised to, you know, highly qualified officers. I mean, this is classic transformation stuff. So I really welcome it, and I'd like to thank all those that are involved. Well done. I'm sure there's, you know, still enhancements to be made, but you can see that it's sort of on a path to significant improvement. Thank you.
Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report exactly for the reasons just given, that it is an indication of improvement and of continuing to improve. One thing which interested me particularly were these contract risk assessments. And I just wonder if officers could tell us what their risk appetite is so far as these assessments are concerned.
I would say that if risks are identified within the risk assessment process that aren't being adequately mitigated already by the active contract management, then the members of the commercial team will step in and support those contract managers to put in place mitigations. So I don't know whether that answers your question.
Not really, with respect, Chair. The assessment of risk appetite is a significant part of the risk process that this council undertakes, and we've improved it in only this year, in fact. So it should be that at every part of the risk management process, the risk appetite is assessed. And I just wonder if risk appetite has actually been assessed in this particular case.
I think I'll have to take that away and look again at the risk assessment. There is a range of assessments between 1 and 4. And when we identify a particular risk at 4, we do put in place further mitigation. So I'll take that away if I may, and provide a further response.
We've just been given the answer. The risk appetite is 3. So thank you very much indeed.
I think what was said was that the risk appetite is assessed between 1 and 4, and 4 being the greatest risk, so further mitigations are put in place. That's what we heard. Not
exactly that 4 when the risk is at 4, then action is taken, and the implication of that when the risk is at 3, it's not taken. So that's the risk appetite.
Councillor King.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a question or maybe a comment, but when I was reading this last night, what sort of jumped at me is the silver portfolio of contracts. What we're looking at is 725 million as it currently stands, right? So it's a considerable chunk of our budget, plus each contract, I think it says, is over 2 million. Yet broadly, kind of the category is low risk. To me, that just feels slightly uncomfortable, and possibly maybe it's semantics, maybe, you know, I might be way off, but it just feels like this particular portfolio maybe would be worth delving into a bit more in further meetings and making sure that all the risk assessments are growing in number. As it says, coverage will increase at an appropriate rate considering the value of these contracts. It just doesn't feel like they should be classified as low risk with over £2 million each. Thanks.
I can certainly provide some further detail at a future meeting. My own knowledge of silver contracts is that they're fairly routine contracts. So even though they might be high value, there's integral mitigations in terms of risk management, but I'll provide further information at a future meeting.
Councillor Nessinger.
Thank you. My question follows on rather neatly from Councillor King's, because it's also about the silver contracts and the example that's provided in there about MS Office software. Given the conversation we had earlier about ERP Gold and the way in which providers are behaving, I wondered whether we ought to be thinking more carefully, or whether there's a piece of work that needs looking at about how reliant we are on particular providers, and whether it is actually relatively easy to reprocure some of our services if the providers don't behave well, for example.
Yeah, so one of the recommendations from the recent procurement governance audit was that we look at our business continuity assessments for suppliers and contracts. And a colleague of mine from the commercial team is currently looking at a process whereby we can assure ourselves that there is a set process and that we understand our risks in terms of those contracts.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Members, I take there are no further questions or comments. Members, we are invited to note the contract management support being provided by the procurement and commercial team. Agenda item number 9, committee agenda plan and appointments to internal advisory groups. Will the Democratic Services Officer update us on any changes to the published report?
Yes, thank you. There's one update to the agenda plan for the next committee meeting. A new item has been added, light blue fiber annual progress report. There have also been appointments to internal advisory groups. Councillor Peter MacDonald and Councillor Tom Sanderson have been appointed to the County Farms Working Group. However, we are awaiting appointments of Conservative and Labour members. Thank you.
Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you. Chair, question in relation to a forthcoming item, which is just listed as Cambridge Biomedical Campus with a start cross indicating the item expected to be confidential. I imagine that this report will be of very significant interest, not least locally, to the biomedical campus. And I also note that it is being presented by our asset manager, which presumably means that it is about the land holdings of the County Council adjacent to the biomedical campus. So I wonder, in terms of risk and risk mitigation and so on, what the PR process is for this, for both members in terms of receiving confidential information and the public at large.
Through you, Chair. The item itself is of commercial nature. We are still in the throes of the negotiations around what that looks like, and there will be a further briefing for members, as was done back in June, if I've got it right, when we were suspecting that this may be coming, so there'll be an update provided at that point ahead. And of course, we'll make sure that we've gone through all the checks with monitoring officer in terms of the transparency, in terms of the need for paper in open or private session. And yes, in relation to the public relations, clearly we will provide communications as is appropriate to the ongoing development of the site, but I also note that there are a number of parties that are engaged in this, including one which has its own PR facility. So we will continue to liaise with all landowners and occupiers in releasing any statements.
Councillor Goldsager.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just hoping that somewhere in the forward agenda list before before the end of the municipal year, we would have an update on what's going on with the disposal of Old Shire Hall, but I don't see anything in the agenda list on it.
For you, Chair, as per the last committee, there is a delegation to myself in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair, subject to the ending of the exclusivity period, which is the 9th of October. There is an extension of 4 weeks if it is deemed reasonable. So clearly we are still within that period. So at some point post that period, I will obviously update councillors in relation to where we're at and the next steps.
Any further questions? In which case, members, we are asked to note the agenda plan and appointments to internal advisory group. Members, that is the final item on today's agenda. I would like to thank officers for their hard work and persistence in the transformational change that we are seeing across the organisation. I would like to thank members and members of the press and public for attending. Our next meeting is on 15 October at 10 a.m. and I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.